Welcome back to the Pittsburgh Sportscast, where two college students discuss all things Pittsburgh sports all year round. I'm Ryan.
I'm Chris.
And today we are back. We've had a couple of days off, but we are back. This will be a bit of an unfortunate podcast that I did not want to have to record this early on, as the Pittsburgh Penguins surprisingly bounced in the qualifying round by the 24th best team out of 24 in the Stanley Cup bubble, the Montreal Canadiens. It is a very, very, very frustrating outcome to a very frustrating series. We're going to split this podcast into two segments. Segment one, we will be talking about games 3 and 4, not only games 3 and 4, but the entire qualifying series that the Penguins lost 3-1. And then in the second segment, we will discuss where do the Penguins go from here. So, Chris, I guess might as well get into it. Your thoughts on this disappointment?
I think disappointment is not a strong enough word. I don't know if there is a strong enough word in the English dictionary for this result. I think the biggest thing that stands out to me after having a couple days to reflect on this was the lack of effort. There was a lack of desire, a lack of will to win. And that's something that I think, as Penguins fans, we should be concerned about, right? Because, Crosby and Malkin, have just consistently been winners, and have always had that drive and will to succeed. And in this series, it didn't seem like they had that will. It didn't seem like they had that desire. Not only is that concerning, that it's also concerning that this has happened in back-to-back playoffs, right? We got swept by the Islanders, and then we, again, lose in 4 here, but it wasn't a sweep because it was only a 5-game series. But yet you can't even force a game 5 against, as you said, the worst team in the tournament. Carey Price did stand on his head. I think you give Montreal credit for that, and you give Carey Price credit for that, as it's what they did. It's what he did. At the end of the day, that's still no excuse for the Pittsburgh Penguins to lose. This wasn't Yaroslav Halak that, when the Canadiens in 2010 knocked out the Caps and Pens, right? This wasn't that. I didn't feel like Price played that well. I mean, he played well and was definitely the Canadiens' best player of the series. But at the end of the day, he wasn't that good. The Penguins, I felt like they didn't create enough. Defensively, Justin Schultz were a joke. A disgrace, I'd even say. Why Jack Johnson got ice time in Game 4, I'll never know. I think I saw a stat where he was on the ice for 70% of the Canadiens' goals, which is unacceptable. I think Mike Sullivan deserves blame for not making those changes. He only made one. I guess technically he made 2 changes. He switched to from Murray to Jarry, which I know you have thoughts on that, so I'll let you speak on that. And you switched out McCann for Lafferty, and then put McCann back in for Lafferty. Just stubbornness. He tried to make some line combinations, but they didn't work. Just no fluidity. The third line was a joke the entire series. Didn't do anything. Like I said, the third pairing, which I'm so disappointed about. And even, we're recording this Tuesday night. Jim Rutherford had his postseason comments or press conference, and he flat out called Justin Schultz out. He said Justin Schultz needs to be better. He had more to give. But yet he refuses to call Jack Johnson out. which makes no sense to me because, yes, Justin Schultz wasn't good, and I agree with that, but Jack Johnson, I think, was worse, and he didn't call Jack Johnson out, which doesn't make sense to me. Just disappointing. And what's even more disappointing about it, like I was watching a Steve Dangle podcast, or watching because it's on YouTube. And the Leafs lost to the Blue Jackets in 5. And someone brought up the point and said the Leafs were an 8 seed. In reality, you never expect an 8 seed to win a Stanley Cup, right? But the Penguins weren't an A seed. You know, if this was a normal season, we'd be in the top 3 of our own division. We wouldn't even be in a wild card position, right? Because we would have gone Washington, Philly, who I think honestly we could have caught, and then the Penguins. So we would have had a 7-game series with the Flyers, not even be a wild card team. So I don't think you can make the argument like, oh, this is a borderline playoff team. Like maybe the Leaf fan base can make that argument and say, well, the Leafs are a borderline team. You know, if the season could have gone on, the Panthers could have caught them, you know, and whatnot. And maybe the Leafs won't even make the playoffs. But that's not the case in Pittsburgh. We were fully sentimented in the playoffs. If COVID doesn't happen, there's really no doubt in anyone's mind that we don't make the playoffs because we would have. So to have that performance with the team, like I said, again, where I get so frustrated is Mike Sullivan should have been up for Coach of the Year because he played so much of the year without Sidney Crosby. He played so much of the year without Evgeny Malkin. He played so much of the year without Brian Dumoulin. He played so much of the year without Patrick Hornquist, right? These big name guys, these core guys, we went month without and were, like I said, fully cemented in a playoff position. And then 4 games, because we couldn't even make a 5th, against the worst team in the playoffs, by all accounts should not have been there. Again, if COVID-19 is not a thing, Montreal doesn't sniff the playoffs. This isn't remotely a series because Montreal can't even get near it. They're only in it because of COVID-19, and to lose in the way you lost, it's just unacceptable. It's unacceptable from a team that has Sidney Crosby, that has Evgeny Malkin, that has Matt Murray, that has all these Stanley Cup winning players. Like there was a stat where like the Pittsburgh Penguin players had won like 22 Stanley Cups between them. Montreal had 0. 0. Not a single player on Montreal had a Stanley Cup. But yet, Montreal looked like the team that had the Stanley Cup experience. And I hate to say it, but I think Claude Julien out-coached Mike Sullivan. Julien had a game plan, and he executed it beautifully. And Sullivan couldn't make an adjustment. I hate to say it. I really do. But he was just out-coached, which is so frustrating by a coach who's won 2 Stanley Cups. Like, Mike Sullivan has won 2 Stanley Cups. How can you be out-coached by that? Like, I don't understand. And I also hate to say that the Penguins' best series, or best part of the series, was the first 10 minutes of Game 1. That's the best they played that entire series.
And they couldn't even score.
And they couldn't even score. Right, and that was the best that they played. Gino was silent. After Game 1 and Game 2, Crosby was silent. Jake Gensel was non-existent. Brian Rust was non-existent.
Gary was
Go ahead.
Worse than non-existent.
Worse than non-existent. These players who you counted on throughout the season to, again, COVID-19 is not a thing to, like I said, fully cement yourself in the playoffs, didn't show up. Now, people are saying, the core is too old. Was it the 4-month layoff? Like, I don't care what it is. Like, I don't like the 4-month layoff excuse because every team had 4 months. It's not like the NHL just said, hey, Pittsburgh, don't play for 4 months and then just come in the playoffs, okay? You cool with that? Cool. Awesome. Yeah, everyone else will play and be sharp, but you guys not. That's not what happened. Everyone, all 24 teams, had that same layoff. So to say, oh, the 4 months is an excuse is not acceptable to me. Not we all, but every team had to deal with that. The core is getting older, which we'll kind of dive into, I think, on our next segment, but just disappointing, unacceptable. So many questions need to be asked of so many people. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely think now that I've had time to reflect on this, I've realized that I don't know where we can get intrinsic motivation from. That doesn't seem like there's any intrinsic motivation for the Pittsburgh Penguins because even throughout the entire Sidney Crosby area, the only time the Penguins have exceeded is when they have been facing adversity. When they are expected to win, they always fail. Because if you look at 2009, right, they were all the way out of the playoffs, completely underperforming. Then they fire Michel Therrien. Then they hire Dan Bylsma, and they have this adversity. They had to climb their way back in, and they do. They they find their way back to a fourth seed, and then they manage to win the cup. The same thing in 2015-16 with the way Mike Johnston was handling things, and they had to fire him and get Mike Sullivan in there. And then they do the same thing all over again. And in the meantime, remember what lost us Dan Bylsma in the first place was that entire 2010 to 2014 stretch. Pretty much every year we were favorites to win the cup, and every year we underperformed because there was no adversity. There was nothing to fight through. And then going forward to this season, when you have Sidney Crosby hurt, you have all these injuries, right? And nevertheless, we were probably the best team in the league without the best player in the world. Then Sidney Crosby comes back. Everyone's expecting more of the same and even better stuff. And what happens right when Sidney Crosby comes back? We fall off the table, even headed into the break. I wouldn't even say it's the 4-month playoff. I would pin it back to before the break because we basically picked up right where we left off right before the break. We were underperforming because I don't know how we can get this team to be motivated other than when they're faced with adversity.
It's kind of like the Penguins they're not good with being the favorite, yes, but almost being supported, right? When someone says, "Okay, you can do it. You can do it." There are people in this world who need that. Like my little sister's like that. She needs to be encouraged. She needs to know that you believe in her. The Penguins are a lot like me in the sense that I thrive when you doubt me. When you say, "Chris, you can't do something," that's what will drive me to prove that you don't tell me what I can and can't do, that at the end of the day, I make that determination. I will determine what I can and cannot do. You sitting on the sideline, I don't give a damn. And whatever you say, if you come against me, I'll let that drive me. And I'll laugh at you as I accomplish what you said I couldn't do. Right? And the Penguins are a lot like that. When someone says, "Okay, guys, you can do it, you can win," they suck. They don't know how. But when the writers and everyone says, "Oh, the Penguins are done, they're old, look at their coaching staff," that's what drives them. It's almost like they need the adversity. They need the haters. They need the people who doubt them to drive them so that they can laugh at them as they're lifting the cup. Right? Each and every year, I go back to the Washington series. Every time in the three cup runs, they were underdogs against Washington. Each time they were picked against them, and each time they won. They proved everyone wrong. Oh, they can't be Washington. Oh shoot, they just did. Wait, they can't be Washington. Holtby and Ovechkin and Backstrom. Oh shoot, they just did. Oh, they won last year. They can't possibly do it again. Oh shoot, they beat Washington again. And then Tampa, I remember in the conference finals, we were underdogs against Tampa. Tampa was unbeatable. They had Vasilevsky, they had Kucherov, they had Stamkos, right? No one could beat Tampa. Oh, Tampa wins game 1 at home, at the PPG. We had to go into overtime to win game 2 to tie the series. Going into game 6, we were down 3-2. right? The underdog, Tampa's going to do it. Tampa's finally going to knock out Pittsburgh. Tampa's finally going to go to the Cup. Nope. Penguins prove them wrong again. Ottawa, we were the favorites, and we struggled mightily. Remember, everyone picked us against Ottawa in that conference finals, and we had to go to double overtime in Game 7. And a lot of games, we looked like trash. We had to make that goaltending change from Fleury to Murray because Fleury blew up and allowed 5 goals in Ottawa. The Cup, a lot of people picking San Jose, right? Because they had Pavelski. This was the first time they kind of looked better than we did. Again, with Predators, they had to star defensemen, right? They had fantastic goaltending in Pekka Rinne, and we were coming off a Cup. We were tied. There's no way we could do it. We got shelled Game 1, even though I think we won Game 1, if I remember correctly, but we got outshot horribly. This team needs that chip. The Penguins kind of remind me, and I don't know if you remember this, but when Pitt basketball was big and
late
was
2000s, that kind of era.
Thousands of people. The Pete had a nickname. This is where the top five teams come to die, because consistently, whether it was in the Big East, you'd have Louisville, Georgetown, Syracuse. All these big boys come in, UConn, come in as top-ranked teams coming to compete and die each and every time. And Pitt was always an underdog against the top 5, even though Pitt was fantastic. But Pitt never lost. But every time they got into the tournament, where they were favorites, right, where they were a 1 seed, a 2 seed, a 3 seed, that's when they would get their butt kicked. Because, oh no, favorites, we had the pressure. What are we going to do? We're not facing UConn as the number 1 anymore. We're not facing an undefeated Syracuse team, right? We're the favorite now. And Pitt would always choke because they didn't know how to beat a favorite. I remember my dad, when I was growing up, would always say, when we would get upset, he'd predict it because he's like, we are the favorites and we don't know how to handle it. And we will lose, watch. And we'd lose. And the Pens do the same thing. As soon as we are the favorite, we just collapse for whatever reason.
Yeah, it's very, like I said, there has to be some intrinsic motivation even when you are favored. Because, like you said, it's great to have a mentality of, when your back's against the wall, you persevere. I could do it anyway. I'll laugh in your face, like you said. I'll laugh in your face as I raise the cup in my hands 2 times in a row. But what happens when, what happens when they expect that, right? Because if you take it back to 2018 and that Washington series, yes, Washington was the better seed, but there was so much conversation. Everyone was saying, oh, of course, it's Washington. It's the second round. It's Pittsburgh. They're just going to choke again. And what happens? We are the favorites and we choke against them. And of course, they go on to win the cup. And that's really what started this whole decline, right? That series against Washington, because it was like we'd done it twice already. Everyone said we'd just do it again. And what do you know? We couldn't.
Yeah. And I think that series, the 18 Washington series, I think we were gassed.
Yeah, 2 cups in a row.
I think, because remember, we were a Tom Kunalka post from forcing Game 7.
Yeah, right.
He had that wing chance and he bounced it off the pipe, and then Washington ends up scoring and winning the game. But if that goes in, we win the game and we go Game 7, and who knows what happens Game 7. So I think that 18 series we had won back-to-back cups. We played a lot of hockey. I think the team was just worn down a bit. Now 19, I don't know what the excuse was. 20, yeah. I don't know what the excuse is.
There shouldn't be an excuse.
There shouldn't be. They need to be better.
Yeah, and as for what we were talking about with the goalie situation, right? The Penguins, of course, made some changes in Game 4, right? Matt Murray to Tristan Jarry. Now, before the game, I really dislike the change. Like we were talking off the air, you know, before the game started, and I mentioned how, if Jari had been made the goalie going into the series, and then Murray was made goalie in Game 4, I'd be okay with it because Murray had playoff experience, won 2 Stanley Cups, yada yada yada. But of course, Jari had one playoff game under his belt before that, and all of a sudden is thrust into an elimination game. But I think my doubts were silenced. I think Jari was solid. I think the goal that he gave up wasn't really his fault. He only gave up one goal. Remember, the other goal was the ENG. Like I said, I don't think it was his fault. He pretty much did his job, right? I
Yeah,
think the blame mainly goes on the offense because if you put Matt Murray between the sticks, I don't think the best case scenario is he does exactly what Tristan Jarry does. But knowing the performance of Murray, particularly in Game 3, he might have let in even more goals, and this game might have not been a game headed into the third period. But I really, like I said, going into the game, I had my doubts with Jari. I think that was one of the cases where Sully made the right decision, but it doesn't matter who you have in goal when you can't put the puck in the net yourself. You need to score to win. Yes, defense wins championships, but goals win games.
agreed. And I have to wonder, um, kind of going back to like the intrinsic motivation thing. Um, you have to wonder, has the team won too much? Because the Stanley Cup takes, and we both know this as lifelong Pens fans, takes so much to win, so much effort. Blocking shots, playing with broken bones, and all that. You wonder with the core that's won so much if they just don't want to do that. If they think, playing with broken ribs and things of that nature is just too tough. Especially with the 4-month layoff, and they just, didn't go as hard as they could have because, well, we've already won 3 times. We're already considered a dynasty. You know? Just kind of wonder if that creeped in. Because then you think, like Crosby and Lemieux. I mean, not Crosby and Lemieux. Crosby, Malkin, Letang. They won more than Lemieux. They won more than Yager. Right? They won more than that first wave of really good Penguin teams. Right? They've won more than all of that. Before this streak got broken, they had made the playoffs 13 or 14 straight years. The Lemieux Penguins didn't even do that. So you got to think, are they just content?
Yeah, I mean, I just, I'm just frustrated. I'm struggling to come up with words to describe this. You know, like I said, I don't think the goalie change made a difference. Like I said, best case scenario, Murray does what Jari does. The line changes up top. I'm not sure. Like, I think maybe that was the difference. Like, obviously, Sherry wasn't his best, but Rusty wasn't either. Rusty was terrible too. And I don't know if the chemistry was thrown off, because how often does Sid play with Rust? I mean, Sherry was
That's the
dropped to the
thing. We
third
don't know,
line,
right?
but I think, and we'll get into this later, I think we're really missing that third line center. You know, we have we always had Phil Kessel back in the HBK line. That was lethal. We had a lethal third line in '09. Pretty much every Stanley Cup championship has that third line that really sets them apart. And the Penguins, who usually have depth and enough depth where they can have a third line that way, heck, our third lines were better when we had all those injuries than they were now when we have everybody healthy. And again, that comes back to the adversity and no one expecting anything from you.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, again, we'll get into that later about moves we should make later, but that's one of the priorities on my list.
Hmm. Interesting. Is there anything else you want to touch upon
Uh,
before we go into that?
I think mainly it's just head into part two while we're at it.
Okay, you lead off.
So, the season in review. All right, so the Pittsburgh Penguins obviously came into the season off a very discouraging performance, being swept against the New York Islanders in the first round of the playoffs. Coming into the season, uh, they looked all right, and then everyone feared the worst when all the injuries started happening. Sidney Crosby, I believe Malkin also was down for a time as well. Uh, Obviously, you had the Gensel injury. That was big back in December. And everyone's expecting us to to be absolutely terrible considering we weren't the best with our core. So no one was expecting anything from us. But again, we fight through the adversity and we manage to become arguably the best team in the league. Without Sid, without Gensel, without Gino sometimes, without a lot of solid players, we overcome all that, become one of the best teams in the league. Like we often joked that the only players that wouldn't get hurt were Jack Johnson and Dominic Simone, our worst players, and I guess that was kind of true throughout the season. Um, uh, yeah, but then of course we finally get the core back, and then we get some assets in Jason Zucker, and I think this is why I think we kind of would have overtaken the Flyers come the end of the season. Yes, we were headed into the break on a bit of a low, but that was before we got Zucker. We got Zucker and things were looking a bit better. We were looking sharper, especially with an extra asset like he was. He was playing with Sid. He was playing really well with him in the absence of Gensel. Even Connor Sherry was showing signs of his old self. When we hit the break, our trades were making Jim Rutherford look like a genius yet again. But then the break happens, and we come out the break, and we fall flat on our faces. So I don't know. I guess the first thing should be there's been a lot of talk about Sullivan and Rutherford. Do they stay? Do they go? What is your opinion on that?
Repeat the question.
Uh, Sullivan and Rutherford. Do you think their jobs are safe heading into next season?
Um, I think both of them are. Um, I think both are safe. I think the more interesting question to me are what players are safe. Are there? Because there've been rumors about Gina. There's been rumors about Letang. Um, is there a player or are there players that you would refuse to trade? Or have the last two postseasons been so bad that you're open to trading everyone? Or did you think, that the two regular seasons were fine? We just ran into some tough teams in the playoffs. And then, with this 4-month layoff, so there's no need for drastic change. What do you think?
Okay, first of all, I think we should keep the first round pick. We picked 15th
Yep.
overall. Unfortunately, we were in the draft lottery. We had a 1/8 chance to get Alexis Lafreniere. Unfortunately, that went to the New York Rangers, as we discovered on Monday evening. But I'd still keep that draft pick at the end of the day because, as you know, I expect better from this team next season. I certainly expect them to make the a 16-team playoff because they would have this season by a safe margin. And at the end of the day, they can either take the pick this year and give Minnesota the 2021 pick, or they can give Minnesota this year's pick, and then we keep our 2021 pick. But I don't see the Penguins going full rebuild. I've heard some people say that. I don't think that's the right call yet. You still have the best player in the world. Yeah, Sid kind of disappeared in games 3 and 4, but over the course of a season, he's still pretty good. I think he's shown how he can adapt his game as he ages. As he's not as reliant on raw acceleration and raw speed as he used to, but that's okay. He can still get it done. But I would say that I would keep the core. So I'd say probably Crosby, Malkin, Letang, and John Marino. Because of how good he's been. Everyone else is on the table.
See, I disagree with you. I do. I think I would agree. I think Sid's untouchable. I think Gino's untouchable. If a good offer came in for Letang, I'd trade him. I would. I think now when we're talking about the first round draft pick, see, I'll be straight with you. I'm not as confident as you are that we're going to be as good next year. Because the Rangers are going to get Lafreniere. The Rangers have Panarin. They have a young core that did well this year. There's a good chance the Rangers are going to be better than the Penguins. The Caps are just going to probably be the Caps. Flyers have been well. The Devils are going to suck. Carolina looks unbeatable at the moment. I don't necessarily, and the Islanders, they won their series, right? The Jackets beat the Lightning. I mean, they didn't beat the Lightning. They beat the Leafs and took the Lightning into like 5 overtimes. I'm not as confident as you that the Penguins are going to be just as good. I understand, we still have Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin, but dude, they're not getting older. I mean, younger, man. Sid's 33, Gino's 34, and I think because we're Pittsburghers, we like to say, oh, the aging process happens, but just not to Sidney Crosby or Evgeny Malkin, right? Well, guess what? I don't care whether we're Penguin fans or not. Like, Father Time doesn't stop for anyone. And the reality is, man, like I said, Sid just turned 33, Gino just turned 34, Letang's getting up there. That core is not young anymore. And yes, we had the 15th round pick, but man, I think Rutherford's gonna keep it. I do. I think JR keeps it, and we pick 15th, and we don't have a first rounder next year.
As is typical most years.
Yeah, as typical as most years, right. But I'm not as confident as you that, we're slam dunk playoffs. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if we're picking in the 15s again next year. Which is why, as a fan, I'm hesitant to keep this pick, because again, like let's look what happened with the Steelers. Yes, we traded for Minkah Fitzpatrick, and yes, that was a brilliant trade, but we could have been picking top 10, and let's be real. Again, we don't know this. We can only make decisions on what we know now. We don't have time machines, unless you invented one and you didn't tell me about it. So let's say we keep the pick, and let's say things go wrong, age finally hits Sid, Gino, Letang, and we have a top 10 pick. Now, we don't have that top 10 pick because now Minnesota has it. Because I'm kind of the opinion of you give Minnesota this pick, and you bank next year. Because if you suck next year, you're keeping like a top 10 pick, and that's great. And if you make the playoffs again, You're picking between 16 and 31, obviously. Um,
32 because I think Seattle
oh
will
yeah,
be in the
Seattle's gonna come in.
2021 draft.
You're picking between 16 and 32. But from this entire run, we've never even had a first round pick ever. So if we make it next year, you're gonna have the luxury of that pick. And if you suck, which may happen because the core's older, then you're spared a top 10 pick potentially. As in now, you just bite the pick, give it to Minnesota. Oh well, we weren't gonna have the pick anyway. Assuming you made the playoffs, which we didn't. So you just bite what you already thought you weren't gonna have, and then play for next year where you might suck. That's like my logic.
Yeah, I could see that, but I think it all depends on. I think here's the thing. I think this could play into the adversity kind of thing, right? To play devil's advocate on my behalf here, on my behalf, if you give Minnesota this pick, right, that sends a message to your players that you do not have confidence in them, that they will make the playoffs. Now, this is a thing that could either prove to be very motivational or it could backfire horrendously. It's one of those things that either unites or completely loses your dressing room. I think, but to play devil's advocate, you have to wonder if knowing the Pittsburgh Penguins of December through February, if GMJR giving that pick to Minnesota and sending a message to his teammates that he does not express confidence in them that they will make the playoffs, if that kind of brings them together and gives them the attitude of we have to prove not only the media wrong, not only the rest of the National Hockey League wrong, but our own executives wrong, if that will bring them together. Now, again, since it is their own executive, it could serve to disorganize the entire dressing room and have them all against.
But if that happens, then I think you just blow it up.
True.
Because if they're like, oh, we're mad at the organization, then you say, by that point, Sid would be 34, Gino would be 35, Letang would be 33, I think. Then you just say, okay, you spent your time, blow it up, and begin that rebuild. Like I said before, I think JL's going to keep the pick, but if I was GM, I would heavily consider not keeping the pick. And then again, because we don't know his plans, right? We don't know GM JR's plans. I think, I can kind of theorize that Justin Schultz is gone. I think when he said, we need more from him, I think that was he's gone. I think Matt Murray's gone.
Yeah, he's an RFA this year, but if we don't get rid of him, I think we're going to have a Fleury situation where we lose him to Seattle because the expansion draft is going to be in after next season. So going into 21-22, that's when the expansion draft is going to be. So, and remember, you can only protect one goalie. So chances are if we keep Murray, he walks for free like Fleury did.
I think those two changes, personally, again, I'm not GMJR, but if you're asking Chris, if Mario Lemieux came to you and said, Chris Karafinski, I trust you to be Penguins general manager, even though you have zero experience whatsoever, I'd like to know your opinion of what to do. I would trade Christopher Letang. I would trade Jack Johnson in a heartbeat.
But who takes him? How do you get them to take Jack Johnson, who arguably was the worst player in the National Hockey League this year?
Again, there's a wonderful thing about hockey, Ryan, where you need to put players on the ice.
Right? True.
And you have teams like Detroit. Like, Detroit's a team, man. They had like 30 points all year, bro.
Yeah,
You
they could
give them
use
Jack
hashtag
Johnson.
tank for whoever the 21 pick is.
Right. I mean, they were the worst team, I think, by like 25 points or something this year. In reality, you could just like kick Jack Johnson to Detroit for like either an expiring contract or like a 7th round pick, and that'd be fine. You know,
Anything
because
to
not even
unload him.
Jack Johnson would improve Detroit. Um, and if not, you buy him out. I was talking to my dad. If you buy out Jack Johnson, it costs you $1 million against the cap for 6 years.
Dang.
Which isn't awful.
I know, but
So like, if you can trade him, like buy him out. Just take the $1 million against the cap for 6 years. Like that's not bad. You can deal with that. So I trade or buy out Jack Johnson. I trade Letang. Is Schultz an RFA or is she still with us?
I gotta look up contracts now.
Yeah, because if Schultz is a free agent, I let him walk. If not, again, I look to trade him or buy him out. Then I just be honest. I would go Letang, Marino's. No, not Letang. I traded him in my scenario. Go Marino, Dumoulin as your number one. You could go Pedersen, like Ricola, and you could just have like Wu Riedel and like Zach Trotman. Or I know you had that really good defenseman that we got in the Phil Kessel trade, who was like one of Arizona's top defensive prospects. Forget his name. It's like Pierre Oliver Joseph or something. And you throw him in there. And then with the forwards, like I said, the only ones who I'm not willing to part are Sid and Gino. Because I just think Sid and Gino are just going to be pens for life. Gensel, I wouldn't touch Gensel. I
Yeah,
think
probably wouldn't need him either, yeah.
he's the future. But everyone else, I think I would listen to from a forward standpoint. Like if you come up with a good offer for Brian Rust, like I'd listen. You come up with a good offer for Jared McCann, I'd listen. Even Jason Zucker, who is a fantastic player, if I get a good enough offer, I think I hate to say it, but I think you begin the rebuild process. I don't think you completely tank. I don't.
Oh,
I don't
yeah.
I don't think you like trade everyone, but I think you slowly begin the rebuild so you don't completely hit rock bottom, right? Think you try to do what the Boston Celtics did, right? When the Celtics
Lost
had
the big
big
three.
three, right? And when it was if you remember when they were at the end of their time, he shipped them all off to Brooklyn. He sucked for 2 years. And then the Celtics, because they got a ton of draft picks, just completely rebuilt within like 2 years, and they were right back to where they were. So I think you kind of begin to do that, where you recognize that this team's aging, and you kind of begin that rebuild. Because you have good young players still. I think you can build around Jake Gensel. You can build. I know that pooling guy is supposed to be really good. You can kind of begin to rebuild around them, and then you still, if you keep sitting Gino, you still have your two big boys, and they kind of like make that underbelly younger. Begin to stock those draft picks, and like young prospects, because like if you trade like Letang and some of the people who I want, I don't necessarily know if you get like a player right now. I'm kind of more looking at getting young draft pick or not young draft picks, getting draft picks and young like high potential prospects, kind of like we did for Phil Kessel. You trade Phil Kessel, you get one of Arizona's best young prospects, right? Who's looking to make the team at next year. So that's kind of what I look to do. Get those draft picks, get high young prospects. Since we keep trading away draft picks because we were a contender for so long, you begin to replenish our farm system, right? Begin to get those draft picks, get those prospects, replenish the that farm system. So when Sid and Gino do, I think, hang up their skates on their own terms, then you have like an underbelly that you can kind of just implement, kind of like what the Celtics did, where Celtics traded away, their big three when it was time, stock the draft picks. You got to hit on the draft picks. You got to develop, right? Which is what we talk about with the Pirates. But I think we can both agree the Penguins are much better at drafting and developing, than the Pirates are. So I have much more faith in stocking young prospects and draft picks to begin that development in the farm system to kind of begin to turn this thing over.
Yeah, I definitely think so. Basically, where I'm kind of in on this, and I'm kind of in that kind of ballpark that, like I think we should see them move into what a successful version of what Neil Huntington claims he was trying to do for like the 2016/17 Pittsburgh Pirates, which was not a rebuild but a retool, right? The core guys are still here, right? And we still have the capability. We have, two of the best players in the world still with Sid and Gino. We have Gensel. We have a young defenseman in John Marino, and we have guys who excelled when all those people were gone. We had guys who came through and rose through the cracks and show what they could do, right? We have a core, but as far as the guys around them, like you said, Hornquist or the Tang, or I'm kind of backtracking on keeping Letang. I don't know. I meant to say Gensel. I didn't mean to say Letang. But Zucker is another one. Sherry, although I think Sherry's just walking. I think he's a free agent this year, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, other than like those four, Sid, Gino, Gensel, and Marino, I'd leave everyone on the table. And frankly, in terms of this core, I think mainly I think that core is the only thing standing between us and like total rebuild. I think I do think we should keep the draft pick and draft in the first round. If we don't make the playoffs next season, I would consider blowing the whole thing up, because then we actually have a draft pick starting in 22, so we can start the whole tanking process and getting some good lottery picks and building for the future and all that. But we still have the core that can get it done. I still have confidence in Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, Jake Gensel, John Marino, those four guys that I already talked about. Mainly, I think I kind of said this earlier. The main thing we need to go after is a third line center. Who was our third line center this year? McCann,
yeah.
Yeah, he's not. When you look at other third line centers we've had in the past, Kessel is what I meant to say. Peter Sakura, I think, was one back then. Jordan Staal, I think, was actually the guy I was thinking about. Those guys, they're head and shoulders above Jared McCann. I almost want to, say that the fourth line was better with, who was it, Bluger but yeah, we saw how the fourth line was pretty good even in the playoff series. But they were some key contributors to us being one of the best teams in hockey, while Sid, Gino, and Gensel and the core were all gone with injuries. And I think, maybe even the fourth line guys, I'm tempted to keep them off the table. It all depends on how young they are and how much contract time they have left, really. I think we have to look at. Obviously, if you come up with a good offer for them, you don't turn it down. But I think it all depends on years of control, UFA, RFA, that sort of thing. But yes, I'm giving them one more chance, honestly. If they go through this retooling process, right? But if they can't show that they can still make the playoffs, even while they're building the next gen, but keeping some of this gen intact. I think if you miss the playoffs, you really have to think about it. If I'm GMJR, I'm considering giving them one more year. If they make the playoffs, we keep rolling with it. If they miss, it's time to blow it up.
See, but you have to remember too that if the Penguins do end up missing next year, you wonder if you you posed a question earlier. Do you keep GMJR and Coach Sullivan? You think if they miss next year, that's going to cost probably both of them their jobs,
Oh yeah.
right? So then you're talking if they miss next year or something happens, then you're talking a Pittsburgh Pirates, really. You're
You
talking
pretty
a
much have
whole
to
new
blow it up.
regime change
Yeah.
with an old core. Then I could get really start blowing things up. Um, so be interesting. Be interesting.
Yeah. So, but I think that I do think that we have to give Sully and GMJR another shot. I think there are
Agreed.
way too many people calling for their heads. I think if anything, I could see Sully going. If we miss the playoffs, Sully won't be the coach at the end of the season
Agreed.
because we will have declined to a point uh, where he gets fired, and we all know what happens when a Penguins coach gets fired in the middle of the season. The last two times that has happened, again, the first time a Pens coach got fired in the middle of the season, we got uh, Dan Bilesma. What did he do? Gave us a cup. Then the second time we did the same thing with Mike Johnston, and who did we get? Sully. What did he do? Won us two cups. So that would breed us more adversity, and that's why I think that's why I'm confident that we're going to make the playoffs. Because if we're ever in a position where we have our backs against the wall, and we're on the verge of missing, uh, we'll find a way to climb back up the hill, dig ourselves out of whatever hole we put ourselves in, and make it back. The only way I could see us missing the playoffs is if the reverse happens. If we come out real strong and we're going out with guns ablazing, and then we fall off the table, much like we did this year.
You want to hear a really bold prediction?
Oh boy, let's lay
Really
it on
bold.
us, Chris. What do you
Well,
got?
okay, I won't say bold prediction. I would say if you came to me in 3 to 4 years and said this happened, I wouldn't be surprised. If Connor McDavid's a Penguin.
Whoa, where did this
Yeah.
come from?
Well, when you were ranting, well, after we finished kind of ranting about, do we rebuild or retool? Think of Edmonton and McDavid and how they consistently suck. And you have to wonder, McDavid, arguably the best offensive player in the world. Not even arguably, I think he is the best offensive player in the world. You wonder, at least I wonder, when do you just get pissed off? Like, you're seeing it now with Eichel and Buffalo, right? Eichel is tired of losing. He's tired of being the only star. He's tired of being in an awful organization. And you remember during quarantine, you heard rumblings that Eichel's beginning to get frustrated, right? McDavid, I think, isn't there yet, but I think he's getting there. He's tired of being in a bad organization. I mean, he put up 12 points, and their team still didn't make it to past Game 4. Think about that. Connor McDavid put up 12 points, and he still couldn't get a Game 5. Okay? You have to wonder, another year, 2, maybe 3 more of like similar results, does he not begin to get frustrated? And given our timeline of our core aging, if you don't completely blow it up and you begin like a retool, right? If you don't think like maybe either Sid or Gina retire and you still have like one of them, and if you kind of create cap room, I know with COVID has screwed up the cap in a lot of ways, but you project 2, 3 years, maybe things level out a little bit, and you like you said, you retool, you have some young talent coming through. You wonder, McDavid or let's put Eichel in the same category of like young superstars. You wonder they suffer through another 2, 3 years of losing. They begin to get frustrated. You wonder with the Penguins' history of winning, right? We've had the 3 cups recently. We had Lemieux. We had the history, right? It's not like we're Winnipeg. It's not like we're Vegas or one of those teams. We're a quote unquote story team with recent success. We're not. I hate to use a team because they just beat us, but we're not Montreal, a team who, yes, they've won 27 times, but they haven't won since the 70s. So we're a team that has history. We're a team that's shown we can succeed recently with the 3 cups when we have talent. We know we can put teams together. I just wonder if things don't turn around in either Edmonton or Buffalo and we retool properly, because I don't think McDavid or Eichel would come to a complete rebuild. I don't think that makes sense for them. Yeah, it wouldn't make sense to go from one rebuild to the other. But if we retool and still in the playoffs, kind of like maybe not in contention, but like a player away. Like if we're in 2 to 3 years, if we're like a player away type scenario, because our core's older, but we retool properly, and we're like a player away, I could see genuinely, because the Pittsburgh loves hockey. We're a hockey town. Taxes are low, right? That's a thing. It's why so many players go to Tampa, because their state tax is so low. PA has a low state tax. Again, with that history, especially if we still have one of the two of Sid and Gino. If we still have one of the two going into like 1 or 2 years left in their careers, and we're like that one player away, I think you could attract a McDavid or Eichel. I really think you could. And then if you attract one of them, you could keep them, and you're good for another 5, 7 years. Especially, like I said, if like Sid's still there with like a year or two left in his career, I think you could drag one of them to give Sid that one last chance. And then, assuming like Buffalo and Edmonton still suck, which I think is a good possibility that they still suck. You could maybe not. McDavid might be harder, but I think you might be able to grab Eichel. Eichel would probably be the more realistic, quote unquote. But again, if McDavid gets frustrated, he could go somewhere. And I think, like I said, we retool properly. I think we could take a swing at him. I think Eichel's more likely, but I think you can swing at McDavid too. But again, if we completely rebuild, then I don't think you'll grab either, because I don't think either will come to a rebuild after leaving a rebuild. But like I said, you're like a player away, you retool properly. Yeah, I think you could grab one. At least take a swing.
Yeah, I mean, that is certainly a bold prediction. I mean, it's wild that this is at least a possibility. Down the line, I could see something like this. I mean, plausible, yes. Probable, I wouldn't say so. Again,
agreed.
If this happens if in 3 years we're talking about how this happened, we can always come back to this and have a laugh. You can show off your crystal ball that you apparently are hiding somewhere.
And
seems like you'd be the time traveler, not me.
Yeah, kind of what I said. Like, I don't expect it to happen, but if like you said, 3 in the future, like Chris Carafensi comes back and says this happened, I wouldn't be surprised. But like, I could see it.
Oh, I wouldn't either. I'd be pleasantly surprised, but yeah. That would be a best case scenario. Obviously, who knows if that happens? Who knows what the future will bring? But yes, I think I don't know. Trying to think of our final thoughts, post mortem, if you will, on the 2019-20 Penguins season.
The team sucked. That's reality. I don't think you blow it up. I think you begin the retool process, though. I think only Sid and Gino and Gensel and Marino are the only untouchables. Those four players. I think and Dumo. I like Dumo, but that's more of an emotional attachment. I think. Like I said, if you get a good offer for Dumo, I think you have to listen. So I think only those 4 to 5 players are untouchable, and I think, like I said, you listen to offers on everyone else. If a team comes with a really good deal, you take it. Like I said, you begin that retool process, not a complete blow it up, not a complete rebuild, but you retool. Definitely get younger, get those draft picks, get those prospects. Um, yeah, I think GM JR and Mike Sullivan are going into their last years if things don't, turn around drastically. Um, I think I don't think you do a lot in free agency. I really don't. I think you just kind of just start trading people at this point. To be honest, you don't have a lot of cap room, so I don't, say you go and like sign a whole bunch of random dudes. I think you just, trade, begin that retool, replenish that farm system, and can kind of go from there. Is really what I would do. I think that's the smartest play. And if
Yeah,
Jack
I think
Johnson's still on this team, I'm going to scream.
please don't scream. Uh,
Oh,
but yeah, I think my final verdict here is one more shot. I think that we have making the playoffs. I think next year is a must. And if we don't make the playoffs, it's time to say goodbye to the core. It's time to blow it up. Uh, I think that obviously Sid, Gino, not getting any younger. We have to move on sometime. Um, if Sid and Gino prove that they can still get it done and guide us back into the playoffs next season, then we can kick the can farther down the road and keep the core together. But at this point, I think it's a ticking time bomb that making the playoffs diffuses. I think missing the playoffs and it's over next season. So I think this will be a very pivotal year next year, more so than um, even years where they were favored to win the cup.
I would agree. One trade I would look at would ship Matt Murray off to Toronto.
Who do you want
Toronto
back?
needs a, Toronto needs a goalie, and they have so much forward depth. Like
True.
you could like ship Matt Murray off there, grab like Kasper Kapanen or Andreas Janssen or someone like that, and you just make like a quick swap. Help Toronto, you help us. I think that'd be a trade I would for sure make,
Yeah.
and
And
then
then
look at everyone else at that point.
yeah, I think I actually really like that. If I'm not mistaken, you've been an advocate of shipping Matt Murray to Toronto ever since January.
I
So
have it because every when Jari made the All Star team, I was like, he's your new goalie. Because remember, I know it was so long ago, but in the season, Jari overtook Murray for #1. So I was like, you trade Matt Murray, Toronto, they needed a backup. Their goalie only has one more year, and he's like 31. So they're not going to re-sign him. So they need goalie help. So I was like, and they have so much forward depth. I was like, you ship him off, you bring the Smith up, so you have Jari the Smith, you're fine, you grab one of their insane forwards, and you implement like one of them, and you're good. And like that'd be a like for me, that's a great first step. It's like you ship Murray off, you grab Kasperi Kapanen or Janssen, both are insanely quick. Probably Kapanen if you could, because he's faster and great on the PK. And then he's a bottom 6 guy. He is. He does. He's not gonna. He doesn't have the hands and the goal scoring touch to play in your top 6, but he can play and be huge on your bottom 6 and your PK. And you just ship Murray because they need that back. They need that goaltender of the future, which Murray could be for them. And then you kind of begin because he's young still. It's only like 23 or 24. And he was in the Penguins organization because we gave him for Kessel. He was part of the Kessel deal that went to Toronto, and they bring him
Really?
back.
Yeah,
And I would be happy with that. If JR could do that, then I think he can really, really retool kind of quick. Because I think he'd be a huge player.
yeah,
Or
I think
Johnson, either one.
step one, do that. Step two, actually, scratch that. Step one, get Jack Johnson off of this hockey team. Step two,
Yes.
do that.
Yes. Agreed.
Yep,
So I
but
think
I
that's
think
it.
I can't think of anything else to say. I'm
Me.
I'm just glad that I didn't go on a 5-hour rant, which I was just scared of. But yeah, I think I've said pretty much all I wanted to say. What about you?
Yep. Agreed.
All right. Well, glad you tuned into this podcast. We would like to encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's Pittsburgh Sportscast. Follow us on whatever podcasting platform you fancy. If you're listening to us on whatever platform, we are on that platform. Apple, Anchor, Spotify, Google, you name it, we're on it. Make sure to follow us on there so you won't miss any episodes. Hit that notification bell if you're on YouTube. That's the only way to make sure that you don't miss a podcast. Comment below any questions, comments, or concerns if you are listening to this on the tube. You can also send us your emails, pittsburghsportspodcast@gmail.com if you're interested there, or Twitter at PGH Sportscast. But until then, I am Ryan.
And I'm Chris.
Thanks for listening to the Pittsburgh Sportscast. Stay safe, everybody, and we'll see you next time.